Another thing that we see because of the lineup of the Earth, Moon, and Sun are solar and lunar eclipses. So an eclipse basically just means that we can't see something. If you eclipse it, you're blocking out the light of it. And so when we have a lunar eclipse, we can't see the moon. When we have a solar eclipse, we can't see the sun. So during the lunar eclipse, the Earth is casting the shadow because the Earth is in between the sun and the moon, casts our shadow on the moon, and so we can't see it, and it goes dark. During the solar eclipse, because the sun, I know the sun is really a lot bigger, but because the moon is so much closer to us, you can actually block out, the moon will block out the light of the sun. And if you think about it, if you take your finger, like your thumb, and you close one eye and you're looking at it, and pick something that's kind of far away from you, and even though it's probably a lot bigger than your thumb, if you bring it in front of your eye, okay, bring it close to your eye and bring it in front of your eye, you can block out things that are a lot bigger than your thumb is, because your thumb is so much closer, and the same thing happens during a solar eclipse. So this is a picture of a lunar eclipse. Once again, the Earth is in between the sun and the moon, and because of that, the Earth is cast in the shadow. When the part of the moon that's directly behind the Earth, that's completely in shadow, is called the Umbra. And then when it's off to the sides, it's in the penumbra, and that's where we can see some light, we see partials of the moon, and so forth. So the Umbra, once again, is that dark spot, and the penumbra is where we have some light that's coming through. So the total are different kinds of lunar eclipses. The total lunar eclipse is when we can completely block it out. We can't see any of it. The partials are where we see part of it. And then we have two different kinds of partials. We've got the partial lunar eclipse and the penumbral lunar eclipse, which is still a partial lunar eclipse because it's only going through part of the shadow. So we can still see parts of the moon in these ones, but in the total lunar eclipse, it's completely gone. So here's our total lunar eclipse. The apogee means that it's at its height. Sometimes it comes out and it's really dark like this, and sometimes we cast this reddish glow, and they also call it a blood moon. So here's our partial lunar eclipse. We didn't quite cast our whole shadow on it. The penumbral lunar eclipse, so you can see it's not as dark. Still casting a shadow on the surface, but not that where you can't see things, or it doesn't turn it that cool shade of red. So our solar eclipses, we have kind of the same kind of varieties of solar eclipses. We have the total solar eclipse, which these are kind of cool because when they completely line up, when the moon completely lines up with the Earth, wherever you're at on the Earth, and that's the thing about it, is that it has to be in the position that you're at. So the moon's going to block out the sun completely, and that's where you're really still not supposed to look at the sun anyhow, even when it's blocked during the eclipse. But if you look through one of those little filters, you can actually see the prominences coming off, and you can see solar flares and stuff like that. It's really very cool. The partial solar eclipse, once again, now you're only partially blocking out the light of the moon. It can be because we're in the penumbra. Only some of the sun is going to be blocked out at this time. And then we have the angular eclipse. So once again, you're still going to see the outer rim, but the moon's a little bit further away. It makes it look a little bit smaller. So it's not going to block out quite as much of the sun. So here's our total solar eclipse. Once again, still making sure that you're looking at it through one of the filters. Never looking at the sun without something like that. But this is the time when you can see the corona of the sun, which is kind of cool. You can also see prominences and things like that. See here on this one, see that little yellow spot coming off of there? Okay, it's a prominence coming off the surface of the sun, or a solar flare. So the partial solar eclipses. And once again, this is all going to be based on your location on the planet, your relationship to where the moon is in relationship to the sun. So every place on the planet obviously isn't going to see it the same way. Here's another one. See, and you can see the prominences coming off the sun, which is kind of cool. Little solar flares. So we get lunar eclipses more often than we get solar eclipses because if it's nighttime and the moon is in the sky, then you can see parts of it. But to see the solar eclipse, once again, you have to have that direct lineup. Once again, part of that's because the moon is so much smaller. So to get it lined up just right so it's going to block out the sun is is a little bit more complicated. We did have a full solar eclipse that we got to see in 2015 in October, which was very cool. So we don't get lunar eclipses every day, though, even though we have them more often. But that's because, once again, that lineup has to be just right. So sometimes we don't see the moon at night because of the tilt of the orbit around us.